Yeah, definitely. Wanted to say thank you, first and foremost, for jumping on the call today and just be willing to chat a little bit about your running background and.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Definitely. First things first, why don't you give us a short intro?
Sure. Well, my name is Lucie Beatrix. On the streets, they usually call me the Viking, like if people see me running around. So like, yeah, Viking. But I am a former fashion model turned speed artist. That's kind of what I think of myself as. I don't really consider myself a runner. I don't fit into the runner archetype. But I run every day, and I like to make music.
Yeah, I want to get into the whole sort of self-described speed artist and just be fast, just win, I think, mentality. But before we get into that, the music thing. So yeah, when you're not running, you're making music. What else are you doing? What's like what occupies your time when you're not hitting the street?
So I would say that like my brain is mostly focused on creating things as self-expression. Like I found in all of my years, like the only way that I can like be a functioning human in society is by making things. So that's looked different over the years. Like for a while, I was really focused on writing, just words, like writing the way my dad was a journalist. But then that kind of evolved to music. I think it naturally evolved into that because I was always around musicians in New York City. And then that set the stage for running because I really saw running as like my time to like consume music and singularly focus on listening to an album from start to finish over and over again a million times as I would run these hour pieces and like work on my times at work on my splits and stuff.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah, they're kind of entangled, like the creating and running.
So I guess like on the topic of creation and sort of how that bleeds into sort of your personal lifestyle, if you had a personal mission.
Oh man, a personal mission is to demonstrate the most radical form of self-expression while going fast. I guess that feels like my mission right now.
I like it. That makes a lot of sense. So I like that you kind of like don't describe yourself as a runner, but you run every day. And I was reading a little bit about sort of like how you got into this and Hurricane Sandy's sort of involvement in nudging you onto the treadmill. What was the aversion, or was there an aversion to running before that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I come from a background where like women don't run. Like I was raised in a really unconventional way.
Yeah.
Like my story began in St. Louis, Missouri, where I was raised in this very new age religion that now they call it a cult. But I mean, I look at it fondly because like the way that I was raised wasn't malicious, but we were taught very specific things in like my household. And one of those things that permeated my entire childhood was women do not run. It is bad for you. It is dangerous. It will like lead to all kinds of problems. So I kind of like saw running as like a rebellious act when I finally got into it. I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe I'm doing this. Like what's going to happen to me? Like, am I going to like, I used to finish a run and think like, am I going to drop dead because I'm not supposed to be doing this?
Yeah.
And, when the opposite happened, when I actually like felt really good running, I was like, wait a minute, I think they got it wrong and I was taught wrong all these years. So it was kind of like this weird awakening. And then even more so was like discovering other runners and like learning about the community and being like, wait, people run and people run marathons and like this is so wild. And so it kind of like opened up a whole new frontier for me.
That's really cool. So on the topic, I guess, of new frontiers, there was also something that really kind of rung true or stood out on your site about sort of like you got to see the entire world as a model, which is rad, but you never really sort of experienced the world until you sort of saw it on your own 2 feet. I don't know, in your own words, sort of like what's the difference there? What's the importance of seeing something on your 2 feet versus just like traveling the world?
Oh yeah, I mean that's such a good question because I had traveled all over when I was modeling and I would be in these places that were like the most beautiful places in the world, but like I didn't really get to absorb them the way that like I could go to Paris or London or Iceland and go run and see a whole city in a day just by like waking up early and go and running around through the whole town.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a really cool way to like get to know a city. And even with New York, I had lived there for so many years, but once I started running, I'll never forget that feeling like on the Williamsburg Bridge, seeing the place that I live and going, wow, I get to like really enjoy it in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And even just like the navigation process of like determining like, okay, I get very fixated on routines. And so there's like one route along the Navy Yards in Brooklyn that I would do every single day. Like people are like, why don't you like deviate and stuff? I'm like, no, I know these sidewalks like the back of my hand, and I want to experience them and make them like better every time. Like, okay, how can I be more efficient with the stoplights? And like, I know at this point there's always a car turning left. So like, how can I like, I like get very like routine specific in specific cities.
Yeah.
I get like that. I'm like that in Austin too, where I split my time, where it's like, I know Town Lake Trail now, like by like the back of my hand, but yeah, it's a totally different kind of experience.
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool. I was just in New York. I think we were trying to sync up for a run while I was there, and I lived there like, I don't know, in my mid-20s, and to come back, many years later and finally like run the city, it was a completely different experience. But has there been like a particular city, maybe abroad, that you've been to many times but you didn't really appreciate fully until you finally ran there?
I feel like Paris, honestly. Yeah. I love Paris so much, and like the first time I went there, I was still like a chain smoking model. I never ran in my life when I went there the first time, and I was just like, there's pictures of me and I look at them now and I'm like, oh my God, when I went back, it was fresh off the Chicago Marathon.
Yeah.
And I was just like running through the streets like, oh my God, this is a totally different place. But yeah, so that probably Paris.
All right. So I want to get a little bit into sort of the speed artistry and just being fast and just winning. So, sort of self-describe that. I love the mentality. But can you elaborate just a little bit more on sort of what it means to be a speed artist, what it means to just be fast, just win? Where'd all this come from?
I think the best way to explain it is that, like I said, when I first started, running was a very solo thing. Like I did not know other runners. I only ran alone every single day for years. And like I said, I just like listened to music and I would like develop ideas and think about things to write on. And like, it was like my time with myself. That was the first time that I was like cultivating this like relationship with like my creative self. And I would have these ideas and listen to these songs and be like, oh, I wish I could do this too. And I want to be making songs that I run to.
Yeah.
So then I started slowly but surely like making songs, and I would only run, like I'd write a song and then the entire run I'd be running to my own song. And all the while I was getting a lot faster. And, people around me were like, you should enter a race. You should start running in these events and stuff, which I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I got the nudge, my sister had me got me a membership for the New York Roadrunners, and I ran my first race and I placed pretty high. And then that's when like a coach approached me and was like, you could run in the Olympic trials if you just like do that again. Like you're basically there. You just have to like fine tune some things. But at the same time, there was so much resistance for me because the idea of running with other people and training with a team, that stuff didn't really come very naturally to me because I didn't meet the other kinds of people at that point that were like me, that didn't have it as a background. Like I didn't know, like collegiate runners were like running with me, and I'm like, I didn't even know the different, like what a 400-meter track was.
Right, totally.
and so like all these numbers and stuff, like splits and like times and paces, I was like, I don't care. Like I just want to run and use this time for like my art.
Yeah.
So I didn't really connect with like, I think that changed a little bit. I did start to make friends that were runners and stuff. There are a lot of runners now that are not artists that I like still connect with. But I do think there was like something about that like made me feel like when I would toe the line at a race and I'd be dressed up with like my makeup and my Viking stuff, and everyone else is like kind of normal and like not, they're seeing it as like, I got to get my watch. I didn't want to wear my first few races. I didn't even want to wear a watch. I was like, I don't get this. Like, I don't care about that. But then like to kind of like make it work for myself and be like, you know what? Like you are going to treat this as a performance art. This is my art. Like I'm on a stage, and I was like, I would run these races and be thinking about like songs and stuff. And I would kind of like make it work for myself and find my own way. And like also in that, I think people who were also like me were kind of finding me, and we were like attracted to each other, where I'm like, okay, there are people like this. There are artists and athletes.
Yeah.
And I just had to keep like living my authentic self to be able to have those people kind of come into my domain.
Yeah, that's such an interesting sort of juxtaposition of identify that with that in a huge way. I feel like when I first got into running, it was kind of just like, I didn't know anything. I had to like Google what strides meant, right? Like it was
exactly.
one of those things. And I feel like once I learned a little bit more about splits and strides and MP, HMP, like all that shit that comes along with sort of like the numbers game, it almost like hurt my running in a little bit because it got in my head versus where it was just like, just be fast, just go kind of thing.
Like,
totally. Painting that picture of it or like putting that sort of spin on it is such an interesting, like almost like a welcoming way to get people into running. And my follow-up question originally was going to be, do you think there's some sort of like exclusivity or inclusivity with this idea of like just being fast or you know, kind of just going, but there is that like just do what makes you feel good kind of aspect to it, right?
Yeah. And like, I think I've also come around to this idea that there was a period of time, like a year ago, 2 years ago, that I was racing a lot. Like I got quick and I was like, okay, I want to like test my times and rack up these PRs and win these races. But then I was like, I kind of just want to go back to this running for myself thing and feeling the best, like doing the thing that I know makes me feel the best for the rest of my life, where I can go to work. Like I work in a photo studio in New York and like do things that are like what I want to be doing with my life all the other hours of the day and not prioritizing running 100% because I've done that. Like I definitely like got inside of like the numbers and really learned everything about all that so that I could run these races, like, you know, and rack up these amazing times. But like at the same time, I'm like, that's cool. But I also like want to go back to like the original thing that made me so in love with running in the first place, which is where no one is watching. And I'm just using this for myself as like a therapy thing.
You know, Leg's whole sort of mission is sort of this idea that through running, we become less lonely. And within running itself, there's a lot of like, you know, you move, you get happier. You're part of a community, you get happier. And there's like sort of, you know, XYZ kind of things happening there. What about running exactly like sort of makes you happy? Like, what is it about the movement that fulfills you?
When I first started running, I always thought of it as like, if I just wake up and do this before, it was when I was still modeling, but I would like wake up and know if I gave myself an hour, like I hated my job. I should just back up and say like when I was a fashion model, I did it all and I hated it. It was like amazing for some things with like my career trajectory to get on the other side of the camera, which was my ultimate goal. But I hated the actual like going to shoots and being an animal, like feeling like I'm just one of millions of girls that they're just like putting clothes on and off and I'm anonymous, whatever. I was like, this is not me. I don't like being criticized for my size and how my face looks and whatever. But I could say to myself, running is actually the easiest thing, which I think a lot of runners don't really relate to this, but like running is actually the easiest thing I have to do in a day, where I go move my body for an hour in a very mechanical, straightforward way. And it leaves me better than when I started. So like if I wake up at 4:30 in the morning and go run for an hour, I'm already like at a level, like I'm like, okay, now I'm like, I can do everything else. I can deal with whatever is like coming my way that's going to be challenging. But that was actually like the easiest thing I could do for myself that makes me feel better. And it also just, I think that was a way that I used to look at it. And then I like shifted and there was a period where it was like actually the hardest thing I had to do all day when I was getting really competitive with times and stuff. But I still kind of think the original way that I thought about it of this is not hard, like logically, it's just going and moving and it will make me feel better for the rest of the day. So like, I know I have to do that for myself. My other thought about it is that like my baseline when I wake up and I'm just like a person, I think that I'm just naturally like a very depressed, sad person. I have been my entire life, and running for whatever reason, the endorphins, whatever, is the only thing that like, or exercise, I should say, when I'm not running, I'm doing other cross training and stuff. Moving my body is what makes me feel like a normal person. Like I'm like, okay, now I can like put my best face forward and be like happy and like all these things that like when I'm not running consistently or not active at all, I just am like not happy at all. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah. Have you been able to find community within running?
I don't really run with other people as much. Like when I'm training for a very specific goal, like when I was marathon training, I had one training partner that I basically ran with almost every day. And that was like he was my best friend for that period. And I still think of him as one of my best friends, but it was like when we ran, we just like, we got so close because it was like this camaraderie. And I think I've had those kinds of people, but then I've also had people on the outskirts where it's like, because of running, we're extremely close, even though we don't run together very much. But just like what we talk about. And like I have a group chat that every single day, it's a bunch of runners, and all day long our group chat's like blowing up, and that makes me always feel like I'm part of a conversation. Like we could be talking about anything, but it's like the running is the only common denominator that we all have.
I think there's also a difference between just joining a community and becoming an active participant in the community. So sort of like finding that happiness through running, like you were mentioning, like running at 4:30 a.m. You're already like putting a fresh face on the day and saying like, I don't know, it's kind of like the army thing of like, we've done more before 5:30 than you do in a day or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
But that whole like level of, you know, up leveling yourself, do you feel that makes it easier to sort of find those communities and be active?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think that I don't think I would have had these kinds of deep relationships with people had it not been for like finding that love of running and sharing that with these other people.
Yeah. So conversely, I guess when you're feeling good, it's easier to be around people. What about when you're feeling like shit? Like you said, a naturally depressed person. I understand that completely. There's sometimes when I just like isolate and I don't want to be around anyone. So like snapping out of that, and like even when people are reaching out, I'm like, nah, ignore text. And if anyone's listening, I'm sorry. I'm okay. But yeah, how do you, like, what do you do to kind of snap yourself out or like remind yourself that, I don't know, through this community, there's something bigger going on?
I definitely will. It's weird. Like sometimes with Strava, like I'll wake up and maybe I feel that way, and I'm like, maybe I slept in a little later than normal, and I'm kind of like, I don't even know, I don't want to run, I feel horrible, whatever. But then I'll look at Strava and see a lot of my friends already ran, and I'm like, okay, well, if they did it, like, you know, I need to get something. And I always say to myself, just get started. You can decide after the first mile if you want to just stop. But if you can just get like a slow mile, 99% of the time, like I will keep going beyond that. And so it's like that freedom of like, just get started, even if you don't know how far, how long, or how fast you're going to go.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even felt like that this morning where I was like, okay, like just get on the treadmill. I'm a very big treadmill person. But I'll like get on the treadmill and just start it, and like 8:30 pace. Like there's no decision that needs to be made past that until you're actually in motion. You're like, okay, fine, I guess I'll run for an hour. Yeah. But like that's kind of how I do it.
Yeah, I don't get people who do treadmills, but you know that's a personal decision. And
it
is what it is. I like that though. You're almost like spinning FOMO then into the motivation, which is, I mean, a good thing. FOMO is always great. It's one of those. I have a lot of friends on the East Coast, so when I wake up and see that they've already run, 3 hours before me, I'm like, well, shit, I got to get out today, because it's a competition too, right? Like there's just an aspect of it like that too. I guess like in that realm though, when you're really not feeling like getting out, there's obviously barriers that get in the way of running, be it physical, mental, emotional, whatever it might be. But what do you think is sort of like the biggest barrier for people just to find time for themselves to get out and run, to get out and move? Like, what's your opinion on that?
I think it's like if people think of an end goal too much. Like, I think for myself, the best thing that could have ever happened was not having any idea what goals there could be. Like, it was just like start, and like just start even though you don't know where you're going. And like so often, like I think people like will see other people that have hit those, like, oh, they ran their first marathon, they ran it fast, they qualified for the Olympic trials, they're in the Olympics. Like they'll start to compare to those things, and then that will keep them afraid of it, because it's like, well, I can't even come close to that, so I'm not even going to start.
Yeah.
And I had coached my mom, who had never ran her entire life, 60 years, and I coached her to run her first mile ever. And it took like, walking. I was like, you have to walk a mile every day before you can run one. Like just walk. And then like slowly. And then she ran a mile, and it was like, wow, like you can kind of do anything if you don't have this pressure of like what you think you're supposed to be doing at a certain time. You know, like I don't know if I had started running and I knew that I was going to run a 2:44 marathon in however many years after I started, I would have been like, well, 6:15 pace feels crazy. I don't think I can ever do this for a marathon. Whereas like, it just is like it happened because I just got started.
Yeah, I think that's such a valid thing too. That 6:15 pace. I feel like too, like when I started running, I don't know if this was the same for you, but it was like I was hitting like 6:30, 6:15s kind of like consistently for my daily runs, because like I didn't know any better. Like it was just kind of like, I just went out and ran. And then it was like once I got like with a group, and once I understood a little bit more about the fundamentals and mechanics of running, and people were telling me all the time to slow down, that's when it got in my head, and I was like, I can never hit that 6:15 again.
Yeah. I had the same thing where I was like, my big thing was like I would always, every weekend I tried to run 10 miles in an hour, and like that was like my weekend workout, I guess, for myself. And then like a coach was saying to me, well, you have to run like easier on easy days and do all these things and track and whatever. And I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I just want to run my own thing. And but like, then I learned kind of the way.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it was a weird thing to then slow myself down and feel weird about it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's a great story too about your mom. I was reading a little bit about that on your site, or I saw some pictures. And so that kind of like feeds into the next sort of section. But do you feel the running community is generally welcoming of newcomers?
I think it depends on like which facet of it. Like I know that when I first came on the scene, people laughed in my face and thought I was a loser. Like, and I like say that kind of like tongue in cheek now because I'm like, it doesn't matter because like I proved myself.
Yeah.
But I feel bad for the people who don't necessarily hit the same kind of time stamp. Like once I finally proved myself, some of those same people were like, whoa, okay, like I guess you weren't a crazy person for coming on the scene. Because like when I first started running track workouts with other people, I want to run a 2:45 marathon. I feel like that's what I can do with like what kind of runs I see for myself. And people were like, 2:45, you're crazy, that's Olympic trials qualifying time, like blah blah blah, like you're gonna have to put in a lot of work, like you've never run a marathon, you've only run a few races. And I was like, I don't know. I kind of think I can do it. And then when I did at my second marathon, ran a minute faster than that with like a really hard fall at the start and all these crazy things. I was like, yeah, I knew myself. Like I knew what my goal was. And like that just like proved to me like that I am in tune with what I think I can do.
Yeah.
But then that said, like with the community, there's like the competitive runner type people, which is fine. But they're just a different kind of people, and they might not be as welcoming to somebody who's like literally just trying to like get through their very first 5K, which might be like more than 30 minutes. And like, I actually, one of my really good friends, she's like one of my best friends. She is in that category. She's like in a, you know, like a very, very modest runner. And like, it's a lot of walk running. And I've walked with her. Like when we did a training run for her half marathon, we like walked 6 miles as like a build up.
Yeah.
So that's, I definitely feel like I am close to the people who are starting from like nothing, because that's what I was. Like I understand it.
Yeah, those are really interesting points. I think that there's something to be said too about like that super competitive versus kind of the, I wouldn't say like recreational, but the difference between people that are going for those OTQs or Olympic time qualifiers or just kind of like trying to get through their first 5 or 10K. And there's big communities within each one of those, and there's concentric circles that obviously overlap. I'd love your opinion too on sort of like the sort of hyper renaissance or whatever sort of words we want to throw about. I think it was Gordon Clark that said hyper growth renaissance era, which I really liked. But like, you know, there's this advent of the Satisfies, of the overs, all these brands that are coming out of the woodworks that are taking the world by storm, and I think giving people a new sort of like induction point into running, because it's like you don't just have to wear the neons, you don't just have to wear sort of like the regular. So I don't know, what's your take on sort of like what the industry is doing right now, and maybe how that's relating to being sort of welcoming?
I think that it is changing the optics of what the runner archetype looks like, of how I definitely relate to you can literally look like anything, and if you run, you're a runner. I think that's what these new brands are kind of catering to.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as like obviously with Museum of Distance Running, which is the company that I'm part of with my business partner Jared Younger, like we're kind of part of that, where we're trying to make a label that caters to the running creative class.
Nice.
Who is the people who aren't the neons and like that stuff, like having lifestyle apparel that's for the runner that isn't fitting into that mold of just going to a big corporation and just wearing like what everybody else has.
Yeah, definitely. The Museum of Distance Running stuff, I like that started popping up on my feed. I think close to around like the Speed Project days, because I think that was kind of like where the guys
we did our first collab with them.
Yeah, that's really, really rad shit. So we might do a follow-up. I think I reached out to maybe you or whoever runs the account to do.
Yeah, Jared and I.
Okay, Jared. To do an interview. So I think we're going to do a follow-up on that. I would love to.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, because he and I, that's been our labor of love, and I feel like when we talk about it, we talk about it together, and it's really fun. We do have a drop coming this week, so we've been super busy.
Okay.
But yeah, and like I think that like what I love about working with him, and what like he's someone that I've met that's like the people who are just so creatively charged and like see this void for the people who are like us that are not, you know, fitting into that standard runner style.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, we'll do like a round table. We'll get something going on that. I think that'll be fun to one thing I'm curious on too, and like Legs' whole kind of thing is like getting more people more maybe introduced to running, or just kind of like feeling more comfortable about movement in general. But any challenges you faced when you were sort of like finding your community?
The biggest challenge was finding the purpose. Oh, like I feel like the biggest thing is like I always wanted to run with people who had a similar purpose that I did and who treated running like, okay, so this is, I'll give it an example. Like when I would go to track workouts and stuff, I always noticed like all these people that I don't know, like we're standing in a circle, we're about to do our workout, and everyone was just like, has an excuse, or like, I'm tired today, or like, I'm kind of sore, I don't know how this is going to go. Oh man, we have 8x400. Like that's a lot. I hate negativity as a coach too. Like anytime athletes would come for these group workouts that I would hold, I feel like maybe it's just like my background or something, but like if I hear a complaint, I just want to be like, we all have a complaint. Right. Everything is wrong all the time. Everyone has taxes. Everyone has some stress that's like annoying. And it's going to like, there's always a reason if you look for it. And I can give you a list of them, but like, I want to be around runners that are like positively charged and thinking about it like that way of, we get to run today. Holy shit, we get to run. Like this is so exciting. And so I noticed with myself, like I would stop going to types of workouts where I was like, I'm just sick of people complaining the entire workout. Like, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, that rep sucked. Yeah, we can't breathe. I'm dizzy. But like, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. Like I want to hear like, okay, like how many more do we have? Like, awesome. Let's fucking do it. So like, I'm just from a different baseline. And I feel like I only want to run or like be around and talk to runners who are in that same world. But like also like, yeah, sure, if you're really sore from a track workout, like that's fine. But it's just like a different kind of like mindset of like thinking it might go back to like that whole thing I was saying of like I grew up not being able, like not thinking running was a thing I could do. Yeah. And then now I'm like, holy shit, this is such a gift. Like we get to do this. This is so awesome. Yeah. So like that's kind of how I think about it, and how the kind of people that I would want to like surround myself with. And like I think more people could benefit from that kind of thinking.
Yeah, I really, really like that. You know, it brings up a really interesting thing though of sort of balancing positivity with the dirges. What do you do then if you've done a race? Like I just bonked out at Boston and I felt like shit for the next couple of days, and I didn't want to hear people say like, oh well, you know, at least you finished and you got to run Boston, that was great. And it was great to hear that stuff, but at the same time all I wanted to do was just like be like, I fucked up, let's move on. Like I wanted to like kind of wallow in my commiseration. So how do you balance that positivity with sort of like that?
Oh, I totally get it. I mean, I dropped out of so many races and had like fiascos and like public breakdowns on the internet where I was like live streaming like, I hate my life, I'm never running again. Like, okay, and I've definitely been there. And I think like, it's like checking the box and like on to the next and like using it as a training run. Like, or, okay, like it was hot at Boston. Like you could be like, oh, you know, like I learned how to run a heat acclimated marathon. And now I have that base that I'm going to use as like for the next thing. It's a glorified long run. And so like, just like recalibrating what that meant. Yeah. And, yeah, like I even like I bombed at I totally stopped and like walked it in at Houston and ran like a 4-hour marathon when I was going for 2:37. But then I like used that as a recalibration. Like, okay, like what was working, what wasn't working. I think I was overtrained going into that, and I could just like learn. And what's the next thing on the schedule? Like, what day is it today? Okay, like that was yesterday. I don't care about yesterday. Like, move on to the next thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a valid point, and I think that's kind of like where I finally netted after the Boston thing. What really helped too for me was I was traveling with a buddy of mine, and just after the race, he was like, you know, if you would have finished faster, we could have been out of here sooner. And he just kind of like kept giving me shit about how slow I was, and that's exactly what I needed to hear. I just like needed someone to just like give me shit for my performance. Keep it real.
Oh yeah, and I keep it real too. I think that's another thing. Like radical honesty. Running is a very honest sport, and like if I went into a race and kind of like came short, like didn't really do what I wanted to do, I don't like the like good for you stuff. Yeah. Like if it wasn't good, like it's like if it was bad, like and it like wasn't my potential, I don't want to hear positive. Like I want to be like humbled. Like no, okay, that wasn't good. Like and I had a coach who I loved named James Chu, and one time I finished one of my first races, and he was like, "This was not a good race." Like and he like gave it to me, and I was like, oof. Good, because I want to hear that, because then it makes me go like I can do better than this, and other people are seeing my potential, and they knew that I could do better than that.
So I guess sort of on that note too, what is like something that you wish, I don't know, maybe nothing, but maybe what's one thing you wish you knew before getting into all this?
I think it's something that goes back to just like life lessons of like take take what you need and leave the rest. Like that's a quote in AA. Like I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm a recovering addict, but like take what you need and leave the rest. They would say that at the program that I go to, where it's like somebody can give you advice like, don't drink, or like, just take it a day at a time. And like and then you could hear someone say, just eat, like literally just eat dark chocolate every time you want to drink alcohol. That advice like might work for some, but I'm gonna like leave that advice and think about something else that does work. So like with running, it's like, what is going to help you stay consistent? And if it means running the pace that you want to run, even if it's a little faster than what people are saying you're supposed to run every day, do it if it's going to keep you consistent. Like, I think it's kind of like using the things that work for you and ignoring everybody else who's apparently an expert and like telling you what you have to be doing. And like, you have to run in these shoes, you have to wear a watch, you have to get off the treadmill, blah, blah, blah. Like I took advice from people that I regret. And then I think at the end of the day, it just like, I had to stay just true to my own, like what I knew was like what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of like welcoming newcomers to the sport? And so we talked about sort of like the brand side of things, but just in general, do you think that there's anything that the running community at large could do to be more welcoming? Is that a thing that needs to happen? I don't know. I'm not trying to say one way or the other if it's welcoming or not.
I think it's like a matter of like within teams, because I've been on a few different teams, like competitive and stuff, and like I think it's just like catering to all types of runners. And, I think about like my friend that I mentioned who's like a lot slower.
Yeah.
And I feel like she's kind of like on the outskirts because there aren't really very many teams that would say you could come to a track workout and walk your workout. I feel like that doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
But I wish it did. And I think it would be really cool if there were more of like levels of like, you can be someone like me and then also someone like her on the same team. I don't think that's even like, that doesn't exist really, but it would be cool if like the competitive nature of a team wasn't necessarily about like your times, but also about like your community and like what you're doing for the sport just by being there. Yeah. Like having no like limits. Like I think it's cool to be competitive, but it's not the only aspect of running. And I think that even races, like you don't have to race to be a runner. And like, I haven't raced in a year and I don't care because I'm like, I don't like, races are fine. I like the nighttime, the 2 a.m. bread runs for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought I saw you on an OSR there or something.
Yeah, those are great because they're right on my timeline of like being a nocturnal animal. So I'm like, that's awesome. But I think that like having the 7 a.m. start and all the like stuff that goes into that. Like I hate that so much and I'll only do it like when I really feel like I have to. But yeah, like you don't have to race. Don't pressure people that they have to race every 5 minutes to like prove themselves and like run all the elite races like Boston and stuff. Like it's fine if that's your personal goal, but it doesn't have to be everybody's goal.
Yeah, I like that. Even you saying that, I feel like a weight's lifted. I do tend to kind of like always look at like what's next. Like I got fucked up Boston. What am I going to do to sort of like have my redemption? It's like, well, I don't necessarily need to have that redemption.
You don't and I think about that with myself all the time. Like I'm signed up for Chicago this fall and like I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I hope that I can like kind of get myself like maybe I end up pacing one of my athletes who's also running it. Like I try to run a PR. Like I don't know, but like I just take it a day at a time and like see what puzzle pieces come together that make sense to like make it work for me.
Yeah. What do you think about the future?
I think that there will be more runner. I think it is like this thing that Gordon Clark said. I think that we're at the pinnacle of it becoming like this huge growth. Like I think there are more runners and people who would have never thought about running in their entire lives are now. I think that in general, the thing that makes me the most excited is that masters women are just dominating and taking over and doing such big things. That's showing that like the longevity is definitely there. So I get excited thinking about, like, I'm in my mid-30s, but I think about, like, all the potential of, like, what I can do in my 40s. And I don't think of it as, like, this timeline the way I thought of modeling, where it's like, okay, you have to do certain things by a certain age or else so it's like with running, I'm like, I can kind of do this for a while, like, thanks to, like, what I'm seeing. And so that's, like, the most exciting thing about it is, like, thinking, like, runners can have a really long, amazing career.
Who do you have to thank for where you are today?
I think that like my guy friends, like my buddies I have like in my group chat, like I think all of the dudes that I talk to every single day about this sport, which is my friend Dirk, Nick, Alex, and Trey, like the wolf pack, like we're like they're like my best friends. So awesome. I feel like it's kind of cool to think that like this odd group of people between the ages of my age 35 and 50, like we're all just in this thing together.
What's on the table for you next? Like, what should we keep an eye out for Lucie?
Lots.
Okay.
I'm in the middle of like all this stuff with the Museum of Distance Running with
Yep.
Launching our first solo drop of apparel,
Cool.
and then making tons of music and hoping that that continues to evolve. I don't know exactly how, but like I see myself as I progress as a runner going into my late 30s and into my 40s, also a musician that I'm hoping, you know, I like that's my labor of love. So I just like want my music to kind of continue to take off.
Nice. What where can we find your music? What kind of music is it? I know about it a little bit, but yeah, give us a little bit of information on that so we can all check it out.
Yeah, so I think my like stage name, so I'm Beatrix is my middle name, and that's been my last name as long as I was a model. But Beatrix is like most of my music is under that. It's all on YouTube. And then on my Instagram, my account's Negative Splits with an underscore at the end. And my music vibe is very it's a lot of like, I guess, vibey. It's like very heady, vibey sounds. And it's very runnable. I run to it every day. So
Nice.
it's very runnable music that at least for me is kind of like it's a lot of my own memories that I like have turned into songs as like
Cool.
like little time capsules. So it like reminds me of things that I've been through.
Yeah.
And maybe can relate to other people. I don't know. But yeah, so I would say it's kind of in the world of Grimes and like Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. Those are like my two biggest influences.
Sure.
So yeah.
That's cool. Do you think that you find a lot more creativity before or after a run?
It's both. Like
Cool.
I'll wake up and sometimes I'm like, instead of going straight to my run, I'm working on a song.
Nice.
Or I'm going straight to a run and then I'm like, now I have to work on this song. So it's kind of one day I wake up and it's music, one day I wake up and it's running. But
Right.
and then they kind of like go right on top of each other.
Sweet.
Of like I'm either researching by listening or replaying something while I'm running, or you know, like workshopping as I run, or I'm writing something, or like I feel like I have to write something as soon as I'm done.
Yeah. Okay. Any parting shots?
Yeah, I guess like my slogan is just be fast, just win, which came from just running every day on the treadmill. And a friend of mine said to me that he had a coach in college that before every race for rowing, he was a big rower. He was like, before every race, our coach would just go, whatever you do, just be fast, just win. And so every run that I did, I would like turn to him and be like, gotta go, just be fast, just win. And so like I feel like that's what I just say to everybody, like
Nice.
no matter what, if it's an easy day, whatever. But yeah, so just whoever you are, wherever you are, just be fast, just win at everything you do.
I love it. Lucie, thank you so much. This has been really, really enlightening, and I'm honored. I'm flattered and honored that you joined us today, and I'm glad that we finally made it work too. I think we've been talking for a while, so yeah, that's all we got for today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.